11-2, Statistical Studies and Sampling Methods. This is on page 502 in Workbook Volume 2, so not the one you've been using all year, but Volume 2. We're first going to talk about types of studies. There are experiments, sample surveys, and observational studies, and we're going to talk about those differences. We're going to talk about bias, and then we're going to talk about the types of sampling. So you should have received a sheet with all of this information on it, so you don't have to write it twice. If you have a highlighter, you may want to highlight the vocab words to make them stand out a little better, though. All right, let's look at examples. So if I need to choose a type of study, so if we're thinking multiple choice here, this is an example where we're going to use the words experiment, sample survey, or observational study. So which type are each of these? So a gym asks its customers if they would prefer the gym to open earlier. Since they are asking the customers, that becomes a survey. So this would be an example of a sample survey. A gym tries out a new weightlifting method to see if it will build muscles for their customers faster than their current method. They're actually doing something, trying something out. And so this one would be an experiment. They're actually doing something to try to make change, not just asking a question. And then example C is a gym counts the customers who come in before 8 a.m. This is an observational study because it requires no interaction with the population to just observe how many come in. Okay. All right. Moving on to a source of bias. So what does it mean to be biased? It is a systematic error in a study that results in a sample misrepresenting a population. So if English is your first language, you've probably heard the saying, I might be biased, but, and it's usually in terms of things like, I might be biased, but I think my kid is the cutest, just simple things like that. But what does that mean? Well, because you're their parent, then are you really a good judge or not? Of course you're going to think your kid's cute, right? All right, so in actual populations and samples and statistics, though, the same types of things could happen. So this example says a soft drink company calls 500 people at random and asks, isn't it true that our product is better than our rival's product? Well, when put on the spot like that, many people probably be like, well, yeah. So in this case, it says 75% of people respond to that. Is it an example of bias? And explain. Well, yes, this is bias because the way the question is asked may lead respondents to give the answer the company wants. So instead, you might want to rearrange that to say, which product do you think is better, product A or product B? Never saying which one is yours or which one's the rival's product, but just asking in general. All right. And last is our sampling method. So we're going to look at some examples and try to determine which sampling method it is. So I'm going to scroll back to the top here and look at our paper here. There's stratified sampling, which is when a population is divided into groups with similar characteristics and a sample is randomly chosen from each group. There's cluster sampling, which is when a population is divided into convenient clusters and entire clusters are chosen at random as the sample. There's systematic sampling, which is when you start with one member chosen at random and then use a rule such as every third member of the population. All of these can be valid, but you just need to be careful to avoid bias. However, the last two have a high risk of bias. So convenient sampling, where you're only choosing the subjects that are in close proximity or easy to get to, and self-selected sampling, which is when you're using something from a group of volunteers, both of these are situations where you do have high risk of bias. So let's go down and look at some examples now. All right. The population is grouped according to age, and a random sample is chosen from each group. So which style is this from definition? Well, by definition, this is a stratified sample. It's unbiased as long as the samples chosen from each group reflect the age group's percentage of the population and are otherwise random. So random is always important there. All right, what about B? A number of hospitals around the country were randomly chosen. Within each hospital, all of the nurses were chosen. Well, this is cluster sampling. Each hospital in the country is a cluster, and some hospitals and clusters were chosen to be part of the sample. It is unbiased as long as the hospitals were truly chosen at random. And then last, let's think backwards a little bit. What would we do to design an experiment to test whether drinking coffee improves memory? And how would you choose the experimental and control groups? Well, the control group gets no coffee, and the experimental group gets coffee. Give everyone, both control group and not, a memory test, then you can compare the results. That would help also keep the bias out because you are comparing both sides. All right, these are the vocab words for 11-2. Make sure that you practice and try some on your own so that you can get better at knowing the different types.